I learned a new word this week. It was a word I had just never heard before. Dox. D-O-X. To dox somebody is to publish private and identifying information about an individual or about an organization on the internet with malicious intent. You publish private and identifying information about a person or an organization with the hope and the expectation that harm will thereby come to that person or that organization. And of course, I learned about doxing because we've all been doxed this week. The Jewish community of Greater Boston has been doxed by this website, the Mapping Project, brought by BDS, Boycott, Divestment, Sanctions of Boston. And what's particularly galling is that the people who created this website, BDS Boston, the Mapping Project, completely anonymous. They took great pains so that their identities will not be known. And meanwhile, they've published the private information about organizations and individuals in the Jewish community with intent to do harm. And you've heard the metaphor about old wine in new bottles. And that's what the Mapping Project is. It is the oldest wine in new bottle, the oldest wine of protocols of elders of Zionism hatred. That is a conspiracy that Jews control the world, Jewish power, Jewish money, and that all these other actors are puppets that Jews control. And that's just dressed up in woke language about the Palestinians. But BDS Boston is not about Israel, it's about us. And they are not coming after Israel, they are coming after us. And they have two agendas. One is to make Jews a pariah. Because of our support for Israel, we are tainted by Zionist colonialism. So we are a moral embarrassment. We are indefensible. We are a pariah. But that's part one. Part two is to also make a pariah out of anyone who works with us, anyone who accepts money from us, anyone who partners with us, non-Jewish actors who connect with the Jewish community. So, for example, ADL trains police departments in eastern Massachusetts. The police departments are infected with Zionist colonialism. Michelle Wu, the mayor of Boston, received money from some Jewish donors. Mayor Wu is infected with Zionist colonialism. The Museum of Science accepted money from Jewish supporters. The Museum of Science is infected with Zionist colonialism. Now, wait a minute. You could say, the Museum of Science, what does it have to do with Israel? And what does it have to do with the Palestinians exactly? Nothing, obviously. But the purpose of the Mapping Project is to shame, is to bully any organization like the Museum of Science or police departments or any leader or person like Mayor Wu, that they should be shamed and bullied into not dealing with Jews, a pariah people. Now, we get what a threat this is, which is why at this week's community briefing, there were over 1,300 screens, because people are appropriately concerned not only about the doxing, but about the bullying and the shame-making and the pariah-making. And the obvious question is, how should we respond as a community? So, of course, the first move is we have to be safe and we have to feel safe. Be safe and feel safe, which is why the star speaker at this community briefing was the special agent of the FBI, Joseph Bonavalenta, who is the head of the FBI field office, which is one of the largest FBI field offices in the country. And Agent Bonavalenta said that the FBI is all over the mapping project. In fact, he said there are 3 distinct FBI task forces that are monitoring this every day. It raises questions of domestic terrorism. Domestic Terrorism Task Force is watching this. The International Terrorism Task Force is watching this. Their Civil Rights Task Force is watching this. Agent Bonavalenta said there's no credible evidence of any threats to the Jewish community, but the FBI is monitoring constantly. It's good to know that the FBI has our back, but of course, Jewish history has taught us that we have to exercise agency for our own safety and our own security, which is why CJP has invested literally millions of dollars in the Community Security Initiative, CSI, infrastructure, expertise to keep us safe and secure, which is why we have security guards, fobs, briefings, and security protocols that have been reviewed and approved by CJP and by the Newton Police Department. So we have to be safe, we have to feel safe. But that is necessary, it is clearly not sufficient. So here's the work that we all have now in response to the mapping project. How can it somehow deepen our own meaning-making? How can it deepen our own commitment to Jewish living? How can it help us think again about why we are Jewish and the ways in which being Jewish adds meaning and beauty and purpose to our lives? Now, in this season with rising anti-Semitism, I have found myself drawn to one figure in particular that I've been reading a lot about and thinking a lot about, and that is the Lubavitcher Rebbe, Menachem Mendel Schneerson. And I've talked about him before recently, but the Rebbe himself was a victim of the Shoah. He lost his brother, his sister, his brother-in-law, his grandparents, uncles, cousins, not to mention Chabad was decimated, and of course the 6 million. And when the Rebbe comes to Brooklyn to start again in the 50s, as I've shared before, he does not want to talk about the Shoah. Instead, he wants to talk about Simcha Shel Mitzvah, the joy of doing a mitzvah. Now, here's where this intersects with us. Here's the Rebbe's big question. You wake up in the morning. You're about to do your daily rounds. Here's the Rebbe's question. He's got his offense on the field, not his defense. How do you invest your life not only with meaning? How do you invest your life with ultimate meaning? How do you wake up in the morning and invest your life with ultimate meaning? And here's the Rebbe's answer. Do a mitzvah. And here's the why behind the Rebbe's answer. The Rebbe says that if you do a mitzvah, it will connect your daily rounds to the wills of the Creator. And there's nothing more meaningful than that. So in Joseph Telushkin's biography of the Rebbe, he tells the following story, which gets at this urgency of mitzvah. It's December 1978. It's 1 week before Hanukkah. And the Rebbe is visited by a guy who is the head chaplain of South Africa's prisons. This is during the apartheid era. His name is Rabbi Shabbat Katz. And the South African prisons actually have Jewish prisoners, almost all of whom are prisoners of conscience because they spoke out against apartheid, and now they're in South Africa's prisons. So Rabbi Katz, the head pastor, the head chaplain of the prisons, comes to see the Rebbe, and it's 1 week before Hanukkah, December 1978. And the Rebbe says to Rabbi Katz, this chaplain, I assume that the Jewish prisoners, these prisoners of conscience, are going to be able to light Hanukkah candles next week for Hanukkah. And Rabbi Katz says, actually, Rebbe, no, that's just not something that we've done before. So the Rebbe says to Rabbi Katz, well, we got to fix that. We've got to let Jewish prisoners light Hanukkah candles on Hanukkah. So Rabbi Katz says, Rebbe, you're just absolutely right. When I get back to South Africa, I'm going to start working on it, and I hope that next Hanukkah, they're going to be able to light Hanukkah candles. And the Rebbe says, next Hanukkah, what about next week for this Hanukkah? Rabbi Katz says, but what can I do? I'm here, they're there. The Rebbe says, well, here's a phone. Call them. Call the head of the prison and tell them that it's a mitzvah and these prisoners have to do it. And Rabbi Katz says, but if I call the prison authority now, it's the middle of the night in South Africa. And the Rebbe says, perfect, call now. Because if you call now, he'll get the urgency of the matter. So Rabbi Katz, you don't say no to the Rebbe, especially when you're at 770 Oceanside Parkway. He picks up the phone in the Rebbe's office, and he calls the head of the prisons in South Africa, and he says, I'm so sorry that I woke you up. I know it's the middle of the night, but I'm in New York, and I'm calling you because we have an emergency. It's Hanukkah next week, and there's a mitzvah for Jewish prisoners to be able to light Hanukkah candles, and I want to make sure that they're going to be able to do so. And the head of the prison authority in South Africa says, listen, I don't know what Hanukkah is, and I don't know what a mitzvah is, and I don't know about this lighting candles thing. But I do know that if you called me from New York and woke me up in the middle of the night, it must be very important. And I'll make sure that your prisoners can light their candles next week's holiday. Why be Jewish? Why is this game worth the candle? Why, with all this static and all this noise, should we continue to invest in our Jewish life? Because in a world of darkness, mitzvah is the light. In a world of despair, mitzvah is the hope. And if we take mitzvah seriously as our response to the mapping project, we'll just increase light, warmth, illumination, connection, meaning, purpose, joy in our lives. That's why be Jewish. But it's not just our lives. Once we do that, we'll be more of a force for good in the world and help other people in their lives. I got to tell you this story. There was a woman named Queen who was a prisoner that we met in Suffolk House of Corrections. She came from Uganda, and we supported her in various ways, and she secured her freedom, and she gained asylum in this country. She actually lived with members of ours down the road for 2 years as she was getting her feet under her. Queen. And she tells the story that after she had gotten her asylum and she was trying to rebuild a life, she's taking the Green Line, and somebody, a stranger, is very nice to her. and seems interested in her and regards her. And so she says to this stranger on the green line, "By any chance, are you Jewish?" And he says, "Why are you asking me that?" That feels like a random question to ask a stranger on the T. And she says, "Well, I'm from Uganda, and I did not know any Jews in Uganda. But I came to Boston, and all the Jews that I have met have been so kind and caring. And you were so kind and caring, I thought you might be Jewish." That's our outward-facing response to the Mapping Project. To give the Jewish people a good name by how we comport ourselves in the world. So listen, so much of the energy around the Mapping Project is anxious energy. It's a threat. And I get that. And we have to deal with the threat. And we are, and we will. But if that's all we do, we're missing an opportunity. Because the Mapping Project is also a call to action. A call to action by us. What is it a call to action by us to do? So the main verb in the Mapping Project, used over and over again, is dismantle. The Mapping Project wants to dismantle us. The Mapping Project wants to dismantle Jewish community. So what is it that we need to do? We need to do the very opposite of dismantle. And what is the very opposite of dismantle? It's not only to rebuild, it's to rebuild so the thing that we rebuild is stronger than ever. That's our standard, that's our move. That what we care about, rebuild stronger than ever. Our commitment to our own safety and security, stronger than ever. Our partnership with law enforcement and our elected leaders, stronger than ever. The meaning we get from our own Judaism, more Torah, more mitzvah, more prayer, more justice, more gemilut chasadim, more acts of loving kindness, stronger than ever. The way we radiate light and hope to the world at large, stronger than ever. Our commitment to Zionism, stronger than ever. Our commitment to the land and to the people of Israel, stronger than ever. We have people from Temple Emmanuel who are flying to Israel tomorrow night for Hartman. Michelle and Wayne have already recruited 40 people for a mission to Israel in December. That's one bus. They want 2 buses. They want another 40 people. Join their mission. Shira and I are recruiting people to go to Israel in April for Israel at 75. Took 2,000 years. 2,000 years to get Israel. And now this year will be their 75th anniversary. We want to get hundreds of people, hundreds of Temple Emmanuel members to Israel to celebrate Israel at 75. Our mantra always was, our mantra still is, our mantra will always be, go to Israel. Dismantle? I don't think so. Rebuild, stronger than ever. We are an eternal people in our eternal homeland, and we are here to stay, stronger than ever, forever. Shabbat shalom.